Hello there. My name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the 52 must-see movies and why they matter. And once again, I'm with Mr. Andrew Cabral. How you doing tonight, Andrew?
I'm doing good, Dan. Glad to be back here on our penultimate show for season one of 52 Must See Movies and Why They Matter. It's been a very long season, but we are on 51 of 52 finally.
Absolutely, we are, and all because of this book and Mr. Robert Osborne and Jeremy Arnold. Um, if it wasn't for this book, we wouldn't have been inspired to do this. So thank you to TCM, The Essentials, Robert Osborne, and everybody that gave me the idea and to do something like this. And I roped you and Stephen and Mark and Billy into helping out. But this is a very interesting episode we're going to be doing. The film we're doing tonight is called Duck Soup, and the main stars are none other than the Marx Brothers. This film came out in 1933 and stars Groucho, Harpo, Chico, and Zippo Marx. And Margaret Dumont, Rachel Torres, Louis Calhoun, Edmund Breeze, Leonard Kinski, and Charles Middle. This is the music and lyrics and everything in this film is done by Bert Kalmer and Harry Ruby. And it's directed by Leo McCrary. A lot of names you probably aren't familiar with except for the Marx Brothers. What do you think about all these guys, Andrew?
Yeah, this is the only Marx Brothers movie on this list. It's definitely not the only one they did. It's one of the more interesting movies we've done out of all of the 52 movies, which is very coincidental that we're keeping it towards the end. It has a very short runtime. This movie is only 68 minutes long. That is an hour and 8 minutes. So it is technically a feature film, but it's a very short feature film. And it's very tight and I would say very funny movie. I mean, comedy is very subjective. You know, what's funny to one person isn't the same to another. But I found this movie to be quite hilarious. It's not a movie I think you take super seriously, but we're probably going to get into all of the ins and outs of this movie. There's some things going on, but it's a very basic movie also.
Yeah, definitely a very basic movie. It's based in a fictional place of Fredonia. I don't ask me how they came up with the name of Fredonia. We start out with Mrs. Teasdale and the Secretary of Finance, Ambassador Tarantino. Trentino, I think is his name. Tarantino, is it?
No, it's Trentino.
Trentino. Okay, Trentino.
Yeah.
He goes to Mrs. Teasdale and asks for a loan of $20 million, not $1,000, not $100,000, $20 million, Andrew. How do they come up with this figure?
Basically, from what we understand in the very first scene, is that the nation of Fredonia is financially strapped. They're on some tough economic times, which is very coincidental that this movie takes place during the Great Depression. That could definitely be a factor into why they're touching upon that right away. This movie did come out in 1933, so it is one of the earliest movies that is on this list. And apparently Fredonia needs $20 million in order to not raise its taxes, because then that would piss the people off very much so. We also learned that recently the leader of Fredonia, who was Mrs. Teasdale's husband, has since passed away, so they need a new leader. And Mrs. Teasdale will only give the money if she can have the leader she wants, and that leader is Rufus T. Firefly, who is portrayed by Groucho Marx. and he is a bit of a character.
Yes, he is. I mean, just that name, Rufus T. Firefly. I mean, are you kidding me? He gets elected president. He gets elected president, so that means Mrs. Teasdale hopefully gives them the country of Fredonia $20 million. And so then we get a song. We get a song out of nowhere.
This movie's kind of part musical, part comedy, part satire. We get a lot of there's musical numbers that are very comedic, and there's very a lot of physical comedy. And I also like how the friendly Fredonia has like their national anthem, which is just like people like a choir singing Fredonia, land of the free and brave. And then every time the Groucho Marx character would like walk into a scene or walk into a place, that music would play. I thought that was really funny. Right away, we could tell the Groucho Marx character doesn't take his job particularly seriously. They're supposed to be they're at this big like this ball or this get together to unveil the new leader, and they're all waiting in line. And they're all waiting in like a procession line for him to come in, and he's like sleeping upstairs, and he slides down like this fireman's pole and just like gets in line. He's like, "What are we waiting for?" It's like the new leader. Oh, okay. It's like it's really funny. But what is also afoot is that the Trentino character wants to be the leader of Fredonia, and in order to be the leader of Fredonia, you apparently have to marry Mrs. Treesdale. She is the one who is kind of the keys to the castle, if you will. And so part of the movie, like we'll get into, is they're fighting over the affection of her, or just basically just to get Fredonia, essentially.
Yeah, this Mrs. Teasdale, she's got the money, and Trentino, he's the ambassador of finance of Fredonia, and Mrs. Teasdale introduces him to another woman, Mrs. Markle.
Yeah,
and
they're kind of in cahoots together.
Yeah,
because Trentino is the ambassador from Sylvania, like some other country,
yeah.
and he has bigger political ambition, like we said, but he and Markle are working together. It's like, okay, you distract Groucho while I try to marry Mrs. Teasdale. That's kind of like their big plan.
Yeah. And so then we get just a buddy, a friend, and he just kind of just shows up. Bob Roland. I mean, the thing is, if you see the Marx Brothers in this film, they're playing kind of kooky characters. Not Zeppo. He plays a normal guy. Zeppo plays Bob Roland, and he's just like this normal guy. He doesn't look funny. He doesn't sound funny. He doesn't talk funny. He's just a normal guy, and his name is Bob Roland, and he shows up.
Isn't he just like he's like a street vendor? Isn't he a street vendor? Just like selling peanuts and stuff, and Chico and Harpo just like screw with him the whole movie.
No. I thought Bob Roland was one of the friends that were at the party. I thought that's who Bob Roland was.
Oh, okay.
I don't think Bob Roland was the street vendor.
Oh, that's somebody else.
Yeah,
I always thought he was a street vendor.
Guy. Yeah, because you think, okay, well, yeah, you put the three Marx Brothers together, they're going to mess with each other. No, the street vendor was not Zeppo. It was Bob Roland was Zeppo, and he's just a normal guy. He doesn't do anything out of the character. He's just kind of there, and we'll see him later on in it too. But the two that really kind of are off the wall and wacko is we got Pinky and we got Ciccolini. Pinky and Ciccolini are Harpo and Chico. Harpo and Chico are Pinky and Chickalini. I mean, this is, I mean, I guess you can write this stuff because they wrote this stuff. But I mean, it's like, really? Look, they wrote this stuff in 1932 or 33. And I'm like, wow, these names. And so Trentino hires these guys to go and mess with Firefly, Rufus T. Firefly. I'm just trying to get my notes straight here because this is kind of a crazy movie. So he go and there you go with the peanut vendor scene.
Okay. Here comes the peanut vendor guy. They screw with this poor guy. I've kind of feel bad for him. He's just trying to sell his peanuts and then like stealing his hat and burning. They keep burning his hats. And it's like, wow, they keep screwing with him. But most of the physical comedy comes from, Harpo and Chico. And it's some great physical comedy. A lot of the dialogue comedy comes from Groucho. Some of the funniest dialogue you'll see in a movie, maybe ever, probably why it's on this essential list, is from Groucho Marx. Some of the sly comments he makes are hilarious, and it's very fast paced. Oh. It's like one after the other. He never stops, and it's fantastically well done.
I mean, I would have like pages of notes if I had to like write down every one of the witty banter and the witty kind of remarks. I wrote some of them down, and this one is a very famous line from the movie, a famous like quote from the movie. A 4-year-old child could understand it. And he goes, I can't understand this. Find a 4-year-old child. That's, I mean, I'm like, I mean, when I heard him say it, I was just like, are you saying what I think you're saying? And I'm like, oh my God, that is just so genius. How fast paced this dialogue is. But he's got dozens of lines like that in the film. And it's like unbelievable how and they just fit together like puzzle pieces. You know, the one word, one sentence, one phrase, they just go together. And it's like you say one thing, he says something else. And it's like an unbelievable way of how they write this stuff and how they put this together. I mean, it was so fascinating to me. Don't you agree?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do, I think, from where the Marx Brothers came from. You know, they came from doing stage, they came from doing like vaudeville and stuff like that. And they brought a lot of that, fast-paced, witty comedy into movies. You know, the comedies weren't like this, quite like this before. You had a lot of physical comedy with people like Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and of course others. But Buster Keaton being the third one. But this is now the sound era where you need a dialogue and you need people talking. The early 30s is when the talkies really started, pick up pace and the silent films kind of went away. And what you get is such great comedic dialogue. I mean, like Dan was saying, this is so great and it feels so modern. You would think that something this would be really dated, but no. Why this movie I think is on this list is because of how influential it is on modern comedies, or even comedy movies that would come after the Marx Brothers. They would all take from the Marx Brothers, and they would take from a lot of other early people, in the same vein as the Marx Brothers. And it's kind of building that comedic foundation that is something we know of today. That mixture of dialogue and physical comedy, and it works extremely well, and it's very entertaining. For an hour and 8-minute movie, it's very entertaining. And that's kind of the point of this movie. Is the plot itself is not really relevant because it's kind of a one giant joke. The whole end sequence when they're having this whole war between Fredonia and Sylvania, none of it is to be taken literally. It's just all based on physical comedy.
Yeah, you're absolutely. We haven't even got to that yet. That's going to be part of a little bit later. Another great line, a great phrase, quote, whatever you want to call it, is four pairs of pants, lives in Philly. This whole line of dialogue was like, I'm like, my jaw dropped. I'm not laughing, but I'm inside, I'm laughing, but outside I'm like just shocked how phenomenal these lines are. You know, I mean, rarely do I get surprised by lines of dialogue in a film, but listening to it was just like magic to my ears, listening to Groucho Marx and so many of these conversations that he was having. And the four pairs of pants in Philadelphia was one of the better ones as well. You know what I mean? There's so many different things. We went back to the peanut vendor, then the fruit stand guy, then he was annoying him, and then the fruit stands caught on fire. It was this whole thing, and then Groucho's up there. What are you guys doing down there? And somehow they end up inside Groucho's house. I mean, it's like, or Rufus T. Firefly's house or apartment or whatever you call it. It's just amazing. And then another crazy scene is when Pinky, played by Harpo, starts showing his tattoos. I mean, the tattoos. I mean, he's got a woman, he's got a house, and then he's got a picture of himself on tattoos of Mrs. Teasdale. Is like looking at these tattoos and is like, how are showing tattoos funny? But they were kind of funny tattoos. Like, you know, who has a tattoo of themselves or has a tattoo of a house? Then superimposed on the house is the face. Oh no, a dog.
And it starts barking. Yeah, the dog starts barking.
Then he's got a woman on one side. He's got a woman. It's like, what made him come up with this stuff? I mean, it's just genius, some of the stuff these guys came up with. And then another thing that happens is they find out Mrs. Teasdale's having a tea party, and he creates a fake letter saying that he was invited. Groucho was invited to the tea party. So they go to the tea party to talk to Mrs. Teasdale. And of course, everybody's there. Mrs. Merkel is there. You know, Trentino is there. You know, another line of dialogue, headstrong, Armstrong. I mean, it's so crazy. The story is really non-existent compared to the lines of dialogue that Groucho is saying. And it's just like the story is like a side note to just these crazy stuff that they're talking about, which really has nothing to do with the story. The story would probably be 20 minutes, Andrew, 20 max.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. In terms of plot, yeah, like 20 minutes of plot and an hour worth of jokes. It's one comedic scene after another. In that scene is where he devises a way to insult the ambassador, because he wants to get him out of the country, and so he ends up like slapping him, and the guy's like, I won't take this, blah, blah, blah. This means war or whatever. It's so great how the Groucho Marx character and Ambassador Trentino are the literal opposites of one another. One takes nothing seriously, and the other one takes everything seriously. And it's just hilarious, their interactions with one another. Another great physical gag that comes up, I think, twice, is when he gets in the motorcycle with the sidecar, and he goes to drive, he gets in the sidecar, and someone drives the motorcycle, and the motorcycle goes, and the sidecar doesn't move. So he decides to go. Another time, he decides to go in the motorcycle and drive it instead of the sidecar, and then the sidecar ends up driving away instead. That's a great physical gag.
That was good. That's happened, right? That did happen twice. In the film. But I'll tell you what, might be the best scene in the entire movie. Ciccolino impersonates Rufus T. Firefly, his real life brother, Chico, Chico impersonates Groucho, looks exactly like him, has the clothes on, the whole 9 yards. He's sneaking into the house. What ends up happening? He breaks a mirror in a wall, a giant mirror in this wall, and so instead of like running away and hiding, when Groucho comes in, he mimics every single move of Groucho, and it's like the most ridiculous scene I have ever seen in my life of mimicking, where he goes this way, he goes that way. You go down, he goes down. He goes out of the frame, he goes out of the frame. He comes back, he comes back. I mean, it's the most. The mirror's broken. It's on the ground. There's broken pieces of the mirror. Well, why does he not notice the broken pieces of mirror? Because that's not the point. The point is the mimic scene of the, and then eventually he catches him. He catches him, and they have a trial. They have a trial of the Ciccolino character. To talk about that, Aaron, I mean, you've seen this movie more than me. Tell me, am I wrong or am I right about how phenomenal that scene is?
Yeah, that's the one of the highlights, I guess, one of the more iconic sequences in the movie, because I know it's been parodied a bunch of times. I've seen it done in animation. I've seen it done in live action, where someone will mimic someone else's actions in order to not get caught. Pretend that they're looking in a mirror. And this is probably one of the first times. Actually, it probably is the first time we saw it in a movie, and it's a fantastic sequence. I like that whole sequence in general. That whole thing about having is that Firefly gives Mrs. Teasdale the defense, the war plans for the war against Sylvania, but the ambassador wants these plans, so he sends two spies, the Harpo and Chico, over to where she is staying, and she happens to, and Firefly happens to be staying there as well. And so he tries to steal, and they're supposed to be in a safe. And one of the sequences before the mirror sequences is he goes downstairs and goes to what he thinks is the safe, and it's not a safe. It's really a radio, and he's twiddling the dial, thinking he's putting in the right code, and really he's just turning the volume up, creating a huge amounts of noise. It's a really it's just funny scene after funny scene throughout that entire sequence, culminating in that mirror sequence, which is great. And that leads us to the trial of Chico, which is really funny because he's supposed to be on trial and they're gonna like execute him, but the whole thing's played for comedy. At one point, the Firefly character even like is defending the Chico character in court, and it just becomes a huge farce.
I mean, I can't. I'm just like beside myself talking about it, because it's like I just cannot believe what I was watching, and it was just it kept on going and going. I mean, this is like you said, it's a 68-minute, nearly 70-minute movie, but it seemed like it went on for hours because it was so much. You could really have to watch it 2 or 3 times to really catch every line of dialogue, every sight gag, every physical comedy gag, every little thing. You would have to watch this movie 2 or 3 times. Of course, after the trial, we get into the war. We know Ciccolino's a traitor, but guess what? He goes and says, "I'll help you guys out. I'll help Rufus T. Firefly out." And so then we get all the brothers. When they're in the war, we hear the bombs going off. We hear we're in the bunkers, and we get all the brothers together, and it's cool to see all the brothers together near the end of the movie. And then we get this funny scene where they, Mrs. T says, "Oh, help is on the way. Help is on the way." And you see the whale, you just see the boats, just see that.
Yeah, it's just stock footage of random crowds of people like running, or they're running, or they're rowing, or whatever.
the fish and the boats and
yeah, the fish in the boat. It's
so
hilarious. It makes no sense. There's a lot of this movie. This whole movie really makes no sense, but that's why it's so funny.
yeah,
Also, yeah, at the end, like they're like fighting inside this house, and like there'll be like a cut scene to like a bomb hitting the house, and the house is like falling apart. It's hilarious. At one point, they decide to send Harpo like through enemy lines to like get help, and they accidentally put him in a closet with like fireworks or something, and it's just like or explosives, and he accidentally lights them on fire. Yeah, he actually lights them off. It's hilarious. And then the movie ends abruptly as anything would end, where like the enemy combatants are storming in, and one of the last ones in happens to be the ambassador because he's leading the troops, whatever, and he gets stuck in the door, and he surrenders, and the war's over, and the movie's over, and that's how it ends.
I mean, it's just like I had to watch it twice. I could not believe what I was watching. I was like, this is how the movie's going to end. This is how all this craziness is going to end. You know, I had to watch it, literally had to watch it twice to really get the gist of how just unbelievably crazy it was. But yeah, I've never seen this film before. You know, I watched some Marx Brothers, but I was more into Abbott and Costello and stuff like that as a kid. Laurel and Hardy, the Three Stooges. And I really wasn't into the Marx Brothers as much as I was those other guys. And later on in life, I became a fan of Charlie Chaplin, watching some of his movies, you know. But I was glad to have this opportunity to revisit or to watch this film and just have this discussion with you, because now I'm thinking, well, maybe I should go back and watch some more Marx Brothers. And I know where to go to find them too, because they had a whole list of them where I found this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the last of 5 movies that they did with Paramount. When they made their transition from stage to screen, they signed a picture deal with Paramount, and this was the last of the 5 movies. This is also the last movie that Zeppo was in. Apparently, Zeppo wasn't in any of the other movies. They actually broke up as a group, and I think 1950. So about 17 years after this, I guess they went their separate ways. I know Groucho definitely had a very successful second career. He is probably the most well known and most talented of all the brothers, in my opinion. At least he's the leader, at least from what I've seen, and he's referenced today. He has that look, that iconic look, the glasses, the mustache, and the cigar that is synonymous with the Marx Brothers. And like you said, there were a lot of other similar people, comedic teams at the time, that a lot of people know of. But this was actually the first Marx Brothers movie I've ever seen. It's actually the only Marx Brothers movie I've ever seen. I wasn't too big into them myself, but I'm a big fan now. This was the second time I had seen Duck Soup. And what is so funny is that the title almost doesn't have nothing to do with the movie, except at the beginning, the opening credits, they show a bunch of ducks like in a bowl, like swimming around. that's Duck Soup.
Well, there is a reference. There isn't a reference in the movie, but I come to find out, like a quote or an interview with Groucho or something. He said it was a bunch of this and a bunch of that, and you put it in a bowl, and what do you get? You get duck soup.
That describes the film pretty accurately.
Yeah. That's. I mean, I don't know. That's what the quote was from the interview that I read, and I'm like, wow. Now I know what duck soup is. So now from now on, am I right? You take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you get duck soup. That's going to be a reference. I'm going to have that now in my brain, because that's kind of interesting how the title of the film came about. But Andrew, this is, we've kind of talked about how essential this film is now thinking about, and why there's a reason why every one of these films is in this book. And we saved this one to second to last, but it's not second to last in our hearts, is it?
Right. It's not. It's coincidentally one of the few comedies on this list, where there's a lot of heavy drama movies, dramatic movies, and they tend to get the most, uh, I guess, attention in books like these or lists like these. It's nice to see one like Duck Soup, especially one that's so early. 1933 is an early time for movies. It's an early time for talkies, like I said. Um, and it's nice to see a movie still be relevant today. Like we can watch it now for the first time and still get something out of it. That's why it's essential. I think one of the through lines throughout all of the movies in this list and in this book is that they're all extremely still relevant, and we can still watch them today and still see something in them that we can take into modern times.
Absolutely. And you need a laugh every once in a while. You need that kind of comedy relief. You need that. You don't need. I mean, I love the dramas. You know me. But I do. When I find something that's good and it's got great dialogue and it has something to say, I will laugh and I will enjoy a good comedy. I'm not that big of a fan of comedies nowadays because they're just all about toilet humor and cursing and just this. These guys, they did stuff that was like relevant to the times and it made sense what they were doing, the gags and the lines of dialogue and stuff. It was all so intelligently put together. And I wish more comedians and I wish more comedies had that kind of pieces and parts to them. We get one every once in a while, not that long ago we got The Hangover, but rarely do we really find a great comedy anymore and a great and the other one is romantic comedy. We got one last year called The Big Short, which was fantastic, but it's about a cancer patient, a person in a coma. I mean, is that really funny? I don't know, but all right. Thank you, Andrew, for being on again. And where can you be found?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions, as well as on Twitter at Cabzilla06.
And you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And season 2 of the 52 must-see movies and why they matter is just around the corner. We only have 2 episodes left, and when they're done, season 2 starts right away. So I can't wait to unveil the films that we're going to be doing. And we're just doing, it's going to be great. So if you listen to this one, hopefully you're going to follow season 2. So for Andrew and myself, good night.